Hi, my name is Caitlin, and today I'll be analyzing the question, why were women in the Victorian era, as seen as in Dorian Gray and other works of art, portrayed as inferior, fragile, and unintelligent? And do these terms still apply in some form today? As a young woman myself, I'd like to note that I disagree that women are any of these set terms. However, I have seen some form of inequality in some forms today in the workplace. Things and descriptions in literature are emphasized and sometimes show a different meaning, as for gender roles for women have changed over time for the most part. To start off with some information, I'll be using several pieces of work, including the picture of Dorian Gray, the painting of Lady Agnew of Lochnaw, and others soon to be listed. In Dorian Gray, written in 1980, the men's character's language towards women of any class shows not only their fictional opinion, but also Wilde's himself's opinion. Poor women, such as Sybil, were seen as uneducated and unintelligent. Same thing goes for wealthier women. The quote, "Tell your Aunt Agatha, Harry, not to bother me any more with her charity appeals. Why the good woman thinks I have nothing to do but write checks for her silly fads," show that men did not care about what women thought were important, as they were disregarded. Mentioning back to Sybil, Dorian lashes out for Sybil for her bad acting, as she made that decision for herself, as she loved Dorian. He didn't care or love her anymore for the one mistake that she had made. Both of these scenes discuss how women were portrayed in the Victorian era. Women's social classes did not matter. The quotes and descriptions that were chosen for Wilde's view are somewhat relevant today, as some workplaces are still filled with inequalities towards women. This is unfair, as having multiple perspectives from both genders should be important to grow as a society. Also, Wilde's composition and diction show how men interpreted women along with society, where women were there to look a certain way and not hold any control. To show how women cannot hold and not be a stereotype, the oil painting Lady Agnew of Lochnaw, painted in 1892, which is shown right here. Lady Agnew is shown to be sitting in a masculine and proper way. The term decorum is a type of rhetoric that was used to be shown throughout this image. The color scheme as it consists of blues, pastels, purples, and whites gave a feminine touch, yet still showing that things can be powerful regardless of gender and fashion styles. These details are used to give a cultural and impactful essence, as Lady Agnew sits and stares as if she's holding her place. Not only is she dressed in a mannerly way for that time, but it breaks the stereotype that women were fragile, inferior, and have to be feminine. Compare that to today's society, women are seen to dress in any way they choose to. While seeing the pieces of work, while taking a look at the other articles, such as Victorian Fashion History, last updated in 2021, Femininity in Fashion in 2004. Both of these articles discuss and use distinct language to give historical context of how women's fashion and how they've dressed played a role in how women were seen by everyone else. Higher social classes, even Queen Victoria at the time, determined how a woman should act and dress by setting a standard. By using accurate timelines and listing certain articles of clothes, these texts give great imagery detail. Women had to fit into gender normalities and use certain fashion styles, as it made them fit into categories where everyone needed to be checked under a box. Even today, femininity in relation to fashion is still somewhat seen, although changes have been seen. Quote, "Looking back at earlier periods today can give women an idea of just how far the fairer sex has come," end quote. To give more emphasis on how badly women were seen as fragile and inferior, the text "The Governess, Her Body and Thresholds" in 2014, a review of Women, Crime and Custody, 1992, use certain diction that gives an uncanny and disgusting feeling when describing women's bodies. Their bodies were their main images, nothing else but objects to everyone around them, hence why they were always disregarded in text when they had their own original thoughts and made their own decisions. These two semi explicit pieces of work both describe the hard truth as to how women were objectified, sexualized, and treated when they did something incorrectly. Believe it or not, being unintelligent was almost bad as being an educated woman. The article Gender Roles in the 19th Century, 2014, discusses that women had two different yet strict lives before and during their marriages. When a woman was educated, they were called blue stockings, and blue stockings were considered unfeminine and off putting for the way that they attempted to usurp men's natural intellectual superiority. Many families refused to let their daughters attend to certain colleges in fear that they'd make themselves unmarriageable. From these lines, a woman's job was to be a wife and a mother, alongside a housekeeper while the man did the hard work outside of the house. Many men thought that studying and women who were intellectual were risking their chances to reproduce. The source is Gender in the New Woman, 2019, helps give context on literary representation of women doing things outside of society's stereotypes. This source is different than others as it's a woman's perspective, and the speakers addresses the differences in social classes of how women can do other jobs while still being equal to men coworkers. The Victorian Era, A Wealthier Society, written in 2017, also discusses the issues that women didn't receive many differences when it came to differences in social classes. Men were more focused on, and the wealthier received more benefits. The composition of these two, even three texts, all discuss how women were stuck doing one thing. The author's dictionary and each all gave an infuriating feeling and showed pity towards women during those times as it relates to historical context. Since women had no freedom in reality nor in literature, this brings the final articles Women's Suffrage in the Progressive Era, 2020, Women's Rights in the Victorian Era, last updated in 2021, and Women's Rights on the Women's Stage or World Stage, 2020 into place. All of these give modern and historical analysis and all include distinct vocabulary along rhetoric to help the reader see why women's rights are important alongside why gender equality is essential to have within a society. Not only were women in Britain during this era suffering, but women from other countries around the world were too. If a woman had done a manly job, people suspected that she was trying to become a man and grow masculine features. I think that's so inconsiderate and shallow as it's unfair and misogynistic. Not only that, since the stereotypes were so awful, women's rights in the Victorian era mentions women were seen by men as emotional and unstable, incapable of making rational decisions. Since society shamed women for thinking or speaking out on our ideas, men were able to beat their wives and have no punishment. Again, women's role in any form was to have kids without their own identity. On the world stage discusses a historical aspect, how women's rights compare to today's society. Women are independent today as they are not any of these wrongful stereotypes. So my answer to my original statement is that there is barely any form of inequality in today's society as everything is consistently changing. Women were stereotyped and forced into gender norms, none of which I agree with, and nobody saw women as intelligent since they never got the chance to adventure out or they'd badly be punished for their actions. Overall, it's important to note that literature and art portrayed these issues as they reflected on the harsh realities. Seen in this image, relating back to the article, the left is the fancier upper class woman, and the left is the poor working class. Both of them still had to be feminine despite their living situations. This next slide shows the gender roles and how men did the harder work and came home to a wife taking care of the kids in the house. And these are the works cited.